Okay, so we're going to be using the calculator to build a table of values to evaluate a function so that we can do this numerical limit thing faster. The first thing we need to do is to tell the calculator what the function is so that it can evaluate it at whatever x value we choose to use. Now, a quick note, I am doing this with the TI-83, or sorry, with the TI-84. A TI-83 is virtually identical. All of the buttons and commands are in the same places. They do virtually the same thing. There are other calculators out there, other TI models and other brands that can do this, but the commands are in very different places. It's like switching from a Mac to a PC, but worse. They're very different in how they're set up. So you may use other calculators, of course, but all of my instruction is going to be based on a TI-84. So first off, whenever we want to work with a function, we're going to be using these buttons along the top here. Whether we're graphing, whether we're building a table of values. So we always start with, on the left, the button that says y equals. Here's where we will type in our equations. Now, if you have a TI-83 or an older TI-84, you will have to use the kind of old-fashioned way of typing in a fraction for this rational function, and that is with division. So we're going to put the entire numerator in parentheses, x squared minus 4, close the parentheses, divided by, and then we're going to put the entire denominator in parentheses. This would be the way you would have to do it if you have an older model. Now, many of the newer models have a way to type in fractions that actually look like fractions, which is really helpful when you're dealing with rational functions. Above these 5 buttons up here, you will see F1, F2, F3, F4, and F5. These are shortcut menus. Now, the TI-83 pluses have those there, but they don't actually do anything, which of course makes me wonder why they're there to begin with. Some of the older TI-84s, that's the same problem, but the newer TI-84s, every one of them that's in color, or any of the newer ones, those have shortcuts in them. We're going to use 2 of those shortcut menus today. Note that above the buttons, we have 2 commands. They're color-coded blue and green, and there are 2 buttons here, second and alpha, which are also blue and green. These are akin to the shift key on a computer keyboard. So if you want to get the blue command that is above a button, you have to first press second. If you want to get the green command that is above it, you have to first press alpha. So to get to that F1 menu, I need to press alpha first. And then when I press this y equals, instead of taking me into the y equals menu, it takes me to the F1 sub-menu. Now, there are, and we will get to some of the others at various points in the semester, but this right here is one we'll probably use very often. This is the fraction submenu. Some of these commands look quite complicated, and to be honest, we probably won't use. The first one is really the only one we would find ourselves in a position to use here. N/D, numerator/denominator. Press enter, and it will take you back to the screen here, and it will actually give you a fraction structure to type in, which is nice. You don't have to worry about parentheses. You don't have to worry, in the same way, you don't have to worry about the expression being very long and running off the edge of the screen. So it's much more compact. Just be careful with the cursor as to where it is, whether it's in the top or bottom. Now, there's no mouse, there's no touchpad, it's not a touch screen, so you're going to have to use the arrow buttons to navigate the cursor. Now, it is not necessary to enter the function in twice, of course. I just wanted to show you guys both of them. My calculator's capacity for fractions, so I tend to use that. All right, now, the calculator can evaluate a function for us one x value at a time, but let's be honest, we're doing an entire table of values. So the calculator can do that too. The table command is at the far right over here above the graph button. Before we go to that, we have one thing we need to do. This over here, TBL set, is the settings for the table. I'm going to go into that. Notice I pressed the second button first. Now, there are several things in here. There's only one we need to worry about, where it says independent. that refers to the x value. Excuse me. That needs to be set on ask, as mine is. If you've never done this before, yours is probably on auto. Oh, excuse me. This is a little awkward with the pencil. Yours might be set on auto, like my dependent is. It is very easy to change that. Just put the cursor so that it's flashing on the word ask and press enter. A general rule for the calculator is anything that's highlighted is the current active mode. If it's not highlighted, it's inactive. Now, these other things up here, table start and delta table, deal with if the calculator is going to build the entire table itself. It would need to know what x value you wanted to start the table at and how you wanted the x values to count up. But the x values would have to count up consistently, which means if we started the table at 2 and the delta table was 1, the x values would go 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Definitely not what we want here. We want more freedom in what x values we use. So we want the independent on ask. The dependent should stay on auto at all times. That never needs to change. Once you change this setting, it will stay that way forever. You will never need to come back in here and do this again. So let us now go into the table. And what we see here is if you have previously built a table, you will see some x values and y values already in there. I'm going to delete them. And we can now type in the x values that we want. If you recall from the previous video, we used our first x value is 1. And as soon as you hit enter, you'll notice that the y value pops up right next to it. The next x value we used was 1.9, and then 1.99, and then 1.999. And these are all the values that we had in the table, but it's a heck of a lot faster to get them this way than it would be to do it by hand. Now, for the other side of the table, so when we do this on paper, we can work from the outside in on both sides. With the calculator, we can't really do that. So it always helps to have your x values established first before you come to the calculator, as we did in the previous video. So for that reason, I know that the first x value, on the other side is 2.001, and the next is 2.01, and 2.1, and finally 3. And what you can see here is all of the y values that we had coming from the top and the bottom towards the middle. And that's it. Very simple, very straightforward. And a very quick way to get the y value so that you can do the numerical limit.